Thank you, Secretary Del Toro. Let's keep the discussion around the military going with the panel Latino Patriots, Latinos serving our country through military service. Latino women and men have a long and proud history of distinguished service to our country. However, the service of our military members is often overlooked and marred with tragedy. As the rate of Latinos enlisting in our armed services continues to grow, we must ensure our service members are safe and treated with the respect they deserve. Please welcome panel moderator, Regional Director for FourBlock, Keta Rodriguez.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Lulac's 2021 Virtual Summit. Today we have a very distinguished panel who is joining us for a discussion on Latino Patriots, Latinos serving our country through military service. As many of us know, Latino women and men have a long and proud history of distinguished service to our country. However, the service of our military members is often overlooked and unfortunately marred with tragedy. As the rate of Latinos enlisting in our armed forces continues to grow, we must ensure that our service members are safe and treated with the respect and dignity that they deserve. This conversation will interrogate these tough issues, as well as inform advocates of policy solutions and ways that they can give back to our Latino veterans and service members. Today, we are joined by a very distinguished panel of guests. I'm going to introduce each one of them and tell you a little bit about their background. First, we have Crystal Romero, retired United States Army Master Sergeant and a member of the Lulac Veterans Committee. Master Sergeant Crystal C. Romero retired after serving 16 and a half years in the U.S. Army National Guard, serving primarily in her home state of New Mexico. She also volunteered for federal service, serving alongside active duty and the Department of Homeland Security. Today, she is an activist for veterans causes and currently holds the following positions. She is co-founder and chief communications officer for Invisible Combat, a veterans nonprofit, a national member for Lulac's Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, and is currently involved in drafting legislation related to military sexual assault and veterans' mental health. Her awards include the Meritorious Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, and Reserve Overseas Service Ribbon. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you on this panel. Next, we have Carlos Luna, Chairman, Lulac National Subcommittee on Deported Veterans. Mr. Luna serves as chairman of Lulac's National Subcommittee on Deported Veterans, spearheading initiatives affecting green card service members and deported veterans. Mr. Luna is a veteran of the United States Navy. As an aviation electronics technician, he deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. He was responsible for the maintenance and calibration of a wide array of electronic warfare systems on the FAA team that provided much needed air and ground support. He is an immigrant veteran raised in the blue-collar community of South Chicago. Carlos, it's such an honor to have you with us today. And next we have Danitza James, subcommittee member of the National Military and Veterans Legislative Affairs Committee. Danitza was born and raised in Sonora, Mexico, and immigrated to the US in 1996. She joined the US Army in 2001 and served in two 12-month combat deployments to Iraq in 2003 and 2005, before leaving the military in 2006. She currently serves on the Lulac National Military and Veterans Legislative Affairs Subcommittee. Danitza holds a Master of Social Work with Military Policy and Program Specialization. Danitza, thank you also for joining us. And my name is Keta Rodriguez. I will serve as your moderator. I am a regional director for FourBlock, a national nonprofit that provides a career readiness program for veterans. I'm a native of San Antonio, Texas, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps for 10 years, serving as an intelligence analyst and deployed to Mogadishu, Somalia in support of Operation Restore Hope. I was commissioned as a second lieutenant, and for 10 years following that commission was an adjutant and manpower operations officer. I currently serve as regional director for FourBlock, and I most recently was appointed by the Secretary of the Army as a member of the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee. And I also serve as a co-chair for the San Antonio Regional Community Veterans Affairs Board, and serve also on the Lulac National Veterans Affairs Committee. Thank you all again for joining us. At this point, I am going to kick off our questions for our distinguished panel. And please feel free to just let me know if you want to speak. We will call on you. So as I mentioned, we have had some very significant issues and events happen over the years for Latinos and people of color. One of my first questions to the panel is, what policy and social changes are needed to ensure the safety of women and people of color within the armed services? Crystal, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Keta, and thank you for your service. I think that one of the main things that we need to address especially in the Latino community amongst the military is the lack of respect. Latinos have served on every front line and have served and died on every front line of every American war. And we have yet to receive the recognition. We have yet to receive the respect. Our Latina women are being sexually harassed and assaulted while, as a result of an occupational hazard. And we've got veterans who are being deported.
Thank you. Carlos, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you. And again, thank you for your service. You asked very important questions. What policy and social change is needed? And it's really been our experience in trying to drive change, policy change around the deported veteran phenomenon, that there needs to be a lot of changes within our community's mindset in terms of how we see each other. We see each other, in my experience in the Latino community, as productive members of our community. And by that, we work, right? And the times today are not allowing for a lot of people to look up in terms of where their next check is going to come from. And we need to be able to change a lot of our environment in order to get people to really understand what it is that people like Crystal and Dee and yourself and myself under Lulac are fighting for. And we're fighting for policies that need to change to help alleviate some of the symptoms of past policies.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And Dee, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you, Keta. I would like to mention that sexual assault is a genderless crime. Men and women and those in our LGBTQ plus community are all impacted in this terrible, terrible crime. But what we need is a legislation that not only protects our service members, but it holds perpetrators accountable and prosecutes them to the extent of the law outside of the command, to make sure that our men and women and our service members feel comfortable and not have to worry about being sexually assaulted while serving our country. It is known that approximately 38% of females and 4% of males have experienced military sexual trauma. And this is not even taken into account the countless crimes against our LGBTQ plus community. So it's very important that legislation is passed that protects and makes our service members feel safe in our armed forces.
Thank you for that. We talk about legislation and it's designed to help keep our service members safe. And, of course, this is one of the fundamentals of leadership, right? Is making sure that you're taking care of your troops, that they are adequately prepared and that they are safe. As we saw last year, we had a lot of activity legislatively surrounding as a result of what happened to Specialist Vanessa Guillen. A tragedy that really, I think everyone can agree should have never happened, and that something must be done about. So I'd like to talk a little bit about a piece of legislation, the Vanessa Guillen Act. Why is it important to those who are in communities of color? Why is it important that the Vanessa Guillen Act, what is it first off, and why is it important that that legislation get through? Now, Crystal, I'd like to start with you.
So recently, the Vanessa Guillen Act merged with the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Act. So it's now the Vanessa Guillen Military Justice Increasing Act. So it's really long now. But the importance of it is that it's going to remove the chain of command from the investigation process and the prosecution process. And that is, I believe, the first step, because what we've seen historically for the last, or for decades, is that the military is investigating themselves, and the command is involved in the process, and oftentimes the command is the problem. Unfortunately, that's historically what we've seen. So this, in addition, and I'll let Dee continue, but the most important part is removing the chain of command from the process. The investigation still stays within the Department of Defense, but it's an outside agency that will make that assessment. Dee, I'll let you.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. So what I should mention, the Vanessa Guillen Act is now the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act. And what we saw with the Vanessa Guillen case is that Vanessa did not feel safe to report. She did not feel safe to report to her leadership, to her command, for fear of retaliation, for fear of not being believed. And what this act does, it moves any legal decisions outside of the military chain of command to a new outside office in order to add external accountability. And this will also require the Secretary of Defense to establish a process so the service members can lodge confidential complaints. It also ensures that the Department of Defense supports criminal investigators and military prosecutors. It requires surveys and to improve physical security of military installations as well. It also improves the training and education on military sexual assault through our armed services. These are all very important things that the Act proposes and it brings into consideration. We all are familiar with the case of Vanessa, right? And what we saw is that as our Latino community, and I speak this because when I saw Mama Guillen speak, I saw my mother, right? I saw my mom who does not speak English, who has a daughter that served in the military and who needed help. And because of our Latino communities are not as ingrained as those of our other races in the military, right, on how the military culture works and how our military leadership handles certain cases, they almost felt alone. And we need to change that. Latinos have served in our service members for, hundreds of years. And the military needs to take in consideration that we are a valued asset to our military, and that is just not to just brush us off aside, right? Like how they try to do with the Guillen family. Families across the country saw themselves in the Guillen family and saw their daughters in Vanessa. And I think that the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act will bring a lot of security and a peace of mind that is very much needed in our Latino community.
Dee, thank you so much for that. And actually, what was one of the questions that we were going to ask is, what should LULAC members know about the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act in the Senate, and how effective it would be at providing justice to victims of sexual assault. As we saw, the Army, the Secretary of the Army, obviously moved to take some pretty I wouldn't say proactive, but to take some action. And really, a lot of that was due to the Latino community, the advocacy. Thank you to LULAC for stepping up, of course, to the family of Vanessa Guillen. And of course, we all want to continue to express, our sincere condolences to the family, but also to thank them for the relentlessness in making sure that justice was achieved for Vanessa, that the Army actually took this seriously and didn't brush it aside. And, we also saw quite a bit of, we saw some mistakes on the Department, on the Department of the Army, right? We saw that they, tried to handle this as if it was something very routine, from the, public affairs to the investigation. And as a result, and as the result of the advocacy, both the Vanessa the Guillen family, as well as Lulac, the Secretary of the Army last year, decided to put together this committee, the Fort Hood Independent Review Committee, that was made of people without, not affiliated with the United States Army, which of course is critical to ensuring that it was a unbiased and took a holistic approach. What else do you think that the Army and the military in general can do to ensure that the members of the Latino community and other communities of color can do to make sure that they are included, that they feel valued, as you alluded to, Dee, and that they are, that they are taken care of in a culturally appropriate way? Would any of you like to answer that?
I'll mention, I'm sorry, Carlos, go ahead. Yeah, so I'll start by saying, as a first generation immigrant and Army veteran, the Army really needs to invest into their recruiting system, right? They need to really invest in the communities that they recruit. They need to invest in training and education for those families of those service members that they seek out to join the military. For example, our Latino community, they need to do more outreach to make sure that the family has an understanding of what military life will be, what the leadership system is like, and what do they need to do, or how do they go about if they were to have any questions with regards to their loved one joining the military. The military sees service members as, once you sign the dotted line, once you leave, you're your own adult. Like, you're your own person. And if you're not married, right, your family, your mother, your dad, your brothers are not really brought in and introduced into the military as some of their spouses are in the military, right? So the Army needs to invest more in making sure that they educate, Latino communities on what the military is and what their rights and resources are.
Thank you. Carlos, did you want to add something?
Yes, and actually, Dee, you went and explained a lot of what I was going to talk about in terms of color blindness. I saw, it was my experience in the military, that we were all blue. And depending on what service you were all green. We see that now in the veteran community that, especially with more controversial topics in our more recent history, a lot of veterans saying, well, I don't see color, I don't see culture, I see all green, all blue. And that color blindness, I think, is really what the military mission banks on, because it eliminates a lot of those problems. And if they didn't instill that change into the individual within that basic training, we would not have the strongest military this world has ever seen, right? The army of one, or whichever motto you'd like to use. And so that really goes on to what you started this conversation with, about what type of policy and social changes need to be made. And that really goes into making those social changes within our military, of seeing the enlisted personnel as more than just bodies. The years I was in the military, when we needed a working party, I didn't go and say, hey, I need 5 sailors or 5 airmen. I said, I need 5 bodies. And the first 5 people that came up, the person that asked what it was about, it was the first volunteer, and everybody else just kind of lined up behind that person. But at the end of the day, there is no sense of individuality in the military, and the person's cultural customs are really second to the mission. And so I think that if we are going to look at the military as a Fortune 500 business, we need to do a lot of cultural changes within the military. And that really goes to who we're recruiting. We are showing, especially with the events that happened over the last year, we are getting a different understanding of who it is that is enlisted, and what types of trainings or what types of changes there would be needed to at least recognize that other cultures are equal to the majority there. So I hope that covered some of your question that you asked.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Crystal, did you want to add anything?
You know, just to kind of emphasize what both Dee and Carlos said, you know, the military relies very heavily on the Latino community for the recruits. And one of the reasons why the Latinos do so well in their jobs in the military is because of how we're raised and how we're brought up, and the discipline that we already bring to the military is it's something that they heavily rely on. And in addition to that, we take pride in our service, because I know for me, it's a sense of belonging to something bigger than me, and having a purpose. So when we put our uniforms on, we wear them with pride, and we represent our country, our families, and we do that with pride. And when we are stonewalled for doing the right thing, or when we're experiencing harassment at work, it makes for a very toxic environment, and it needs to change.
Thank you for that. You've raised a really good point about, and all of you actually touched on this, is, the Latino community and their contributions to the defense of this country, to our military. We are some of the most patriotic Americans. And history shows that, like you said, Crystal, that Latinos have done extremely well in the military. I'm sure y'all have all seen the statistic about Latinos, the number of Latinos who received the Medal of Honor or nominated for the Medal of Honor based on their service per capita is really outpaces any other demographic. And that's because people have, we have not shied to step up to serve our country. But given all of these concerns that, of course, that many families may be experiencing now, obviously as a result of the things that have happened over the last year or so, how can Latinx veterans ease the concerns of community members and provide more support for Latino youth that are making the decision to enlist or explore other options? Obviously, all of y'all served and served so with distinction, and feels like all of you, and I myself too, very proud of our service, and we know that it can be a very good path for many people within the Latino community, many youth, to succeed in life. And so what could we as veterans in the Latino community do to ease those concerns of those families, of those mothers and fathers, and of the youth themselves that are joining the military to enlist or explore other options?
I would say get involved with your, every state has VFWs, they have vet centers, they have, every military base has a family support program. They've got there's lots of resources out there for families, to get involved, for the community to get involved. But what I would like to see is the military advertising those more, because if you don't know it's there, you don't know to go participate. So I think that they need to do a better job of marketing these programs that are available so that the community can get involved. Because one thing I've learned is that the communities, even the families, they want to be involved. And I think that the more involved they are, the less, not the less, accidents or incidents we'll have, but I think we'll certainly see a decrease, because the families have a deeper understanding of their loved one that's serving. And when you have a deeper understanding, then it's a lot easier for you to provide support.
Thank you. Unless Danitza or Dee or Carlos, if you have something else that you want to provide, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about our deported veterans. So tell the people that are watching this, what is a green card veteran? How are they deported? And does deportation have an impact on relationships between the military and the Latinx community? Can you talk a little bit about that? Carlos, I'm going to start with you since you've done a lot of work in this area.
Oh, thank you for that, Keta. And actually, it goes back to what Ms. Romero was just talking about. Our LULAC Council started because of our veterans wanting to get involved, myself included, and LULAC gave us that opportunity. We have taken that to that mission to act locally in order to impact national policy. And so we invite others to look at greencardvets.org, follow us on social media, and see how we're getting involved with community gardens. We actually did a mural for Vanessa to raise awareness that our LULAC partners down in Texas and in Killeen were working with the family. And really a lot of the supporters that we had around the topic of deported veterans were really able to identify with that. And it really takes us, and that takes us back to what is a green card veteran? Well, that is a person who grew up living the immigrant experience, which like we said here, included military service for many of us. I myself was born in Mexico, yet my father is a Marine. And so it is generational, just like a lot of the things that have been instilled in us, right? Our work ethic, our integrity. And so when these men and women are living in a environment that is statistically more stressful than others, the immigrant community, and they go on into the military, which is full of its own stressors and traumas, right? And they're not getting any help for any of this along the way. And then they are released into our communities, again, with lack of access to the appropriate resources, whether that's medical, whether that's educational, whether that is simply a peer support system, right? They find themselves, like many have, into getting into the justice system. And then really there is where a lot of their troubles began, because that integrity allows for, has allowed for many of them to plead guilty to charges just so they can get that nightmare over with, right? Without an appropriate legal representation to tell them, hey, we can fight this. Yes, you might have done something that was inappropriate, but you definitely don't deserve the punishments that are going to go with this, right? We are looking now at having a more restorative justice approach to our mass incarceration system. And I feel that that lens and that technology, right, those analyses, those studies should be afforded to these veterans retroactively. And so there are service members without citizenship in the military. Margaret Stock, a leading attorney in this, testified before Congress that it is about 70% more difficult for a service member to be naturalized a U.S. citizen than their non-citizen counterparts. That's pretty staggering. That's pretty significant, right? Because when they do get released into our communities without that citizenship status, then they are open to not only be preyed upon by our criminal justice system, but preyed upon even further by our criminal immigration system and enforcement system. So this is what a green card service member and green card veteran is in a nutshell. Dee?
Yeah, I'll just like to add a little bit of a personal experience. So I served in the Army my entire career with a green card. My mother and my parents immigrated here. They got residency for us, and I joined the Army with a green card. I was stationed in Germany, and in 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, I was deployed to Iraq. And it wasn't because my leaders did not take an interest in making sure that I filed for my citizenship, but it was because of the up tempo of the military mission, my current deployment, the location of it, kept me from attending my citizenship ceremony in Baghdad, Iraq. Once I redeployed back to Germany, they moved my paperwork to Rome, but yet I was given orders to deploy again to Iraq, yet missing again my citizenship ceremony. When I left the Army in 2006, I was a green card holder, and I quite honestly, I had no idea where my green card was. My green card had been my military ID card. And it was expired, and had it not been because I married a service member who received orders to PCS, the military may have not expedited my case and my citizenship for processing. So I could have fell prey to the criminal system, right? Because I was suffering from PTSD, combat PTSD, and from military sexual trauma PTSD as well. I was using alcohol to cope. So if I had not had a support system there for me at that time, I could have been a deported veteran. When I was in the service, nobody asked me what my citizenship was. It was about my buddy to my left and to my right, and that was our focus, right? There really needs to be an investment into immigrant veterans who are serving with green cards. When I left, I had no idea that there was a law established in 1996 that could put me at risk of deportation had I fallen victim to a crime. So there's a lot of education that is needed when it comes to green card veterans and deported veterans. And I think that could be a place where we can start, where Lulac can start, and is actually doing through the Green Card Veteran Council. Carlos and Joel have done an amazing job at getting the word out, and myself included. I just had no idea how many deported veterans there were until the past year. So just a personal experience, I really think that we need to do better by our immigrant service members.
Wow, thank you for sharing that personal experience. I mean, that's so powerful. And as military members, we are taught, right, again, to take care of each other, those to the left and right of us. And somehow in the military, we are still leaving people behind, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Can the committee shed light on what has been occurring with those veterans who have served the country and have been deported? Because I know a lot of, I think I recently saw a documentary on, what has happened to at least one deported veteran. But if you can shed some light and just kind of inform people on, what those veterans are going through that have been deported.
Thank you for that question. In short, they're going through hell. The places where they have been deported already lack resources that are appropriate to care for them. And then the pandemic hit. So it made not only access to resources more difficult, but even just everyday life that much more difficult. What is going on? Big news this year with the Biden administration, with the president's administration, stating that they were going to stop the deportation of veterans and bringing veterans home. Unfortunately, as we've seen in other cases, the discretion on who is deported and who is not deported is really down at the ground level. And so since then, at least 2 veterans have been deported since our president's announcement. So there really is little hope on the ground in terms of people coming back in time to be with their family. We see that this pandemic is affecting our communities harder than other communities. And so we have veterans that are abroad in countries that really don't recognize them as their own countrymen, watching their family members going through the worst pandemic that this world has seen in over 100 years. And so one of the things that we believe would help, because of the nuances and difficulties in creating a blanket repatriating them in one swift motion is looking at Congressman Takano's bill, HR 1182. From our research, that the Veteran Deportation and Reform Act is the most comprehensive bill to address this issue in the House. Now, it provides guidance on how these local enforcement agents can give judicial discretion to stop these veterans from being deported. It'll create a commission to study this phenomenon going back to 1990, which, like Dee mentioned, some of these bills these federal bills that made it more easy for veterans deported in 1994 and 1996. So going back to 1990 is a great place to start, in my opinion. And another great thing about it is it includes military families, because anyone who deployed will tell you that their family deployed with them. And so it is important that we recognize that the family, and not just biological at all times, but even the step families, their family, who that person sees as a family, is helped out. We have active duty service members and veterans whose spouses are fighting deportation right now, whose children with those spouses are severely disabled. And yet there is no leniency being showed to them. And we're talking about disabled veterans and active duty service members. And if we cannot get them the discretion that they've earned, what hope do we have for the rest of the immigrants who were not able to or did not enlist in our military, but have contributed to our communities just as much or even more?
Thank you so much for that. Either Crystal or Dee, was there anything that you wanted to add?
So I wanted to give an example of a young woman who is currently deported to Costa Rica. Her name is Laura Mesa, and Dee and I had been working with her, as well as Carlos. Carlos is, all of us, we've been in communication with her, and she was a victim of sexual assault in the military. So when she got out, as a result of her trauma, she turned to drugs and alcohol, which is very common for someone who has been raped or assaulted in any way. That's often a coping mechanism. And she got into some trouble and was deported. She's been deported for 9 years, and she's been separated from her daughter for that period of time. And right now in Costa Rica, she's not able to get the mental health care that she needs for her trauma. She was deployed. So in addition to her sexual assault, she's also got combat post-traumatic stress disorder. And we've been championing for her for quite some time now. And we need the communities to get involved. We need other people, it's like just the three of us and Joel from Green Card Veterans as well. There's only 4 of us, and there's, I believe, over 200 deported veterans. So we need more exposure on this. That's just one example. But Dee, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on Laura.
Well, I kind of want to touch on Laura, but also on the points that Carlos made. What our system is doing, it's criminalizing our mental health, and that the mental health, post-traumatic stress that service members endured during military service, right? They are not given a second chance. Laura served her sentence for the crimes that she committed. After serving her sentence, she was sent to ICE detention center to begin her deportation proceedings. If an American citizen would have committed the same crimes, would have served the time in their sentence, they would have been given a second chance at getting their life together, right? Entering into some mental health services provided by the VA, and to obtain all of these resources that America has. However, because she served with a green card, she did not get afforded that opportunity. Our mental health problems, right, that we endure in the military, they don't stay in the US. They go with us wherever we go. However, the quality of care offered abroad is not often the same as here in the United States. It is very hard to find, the kind of support of qualified, mental health professional who may have experience with military PTSD, for example, down in Tijuana, right? Or down in Puebla, Mexico, or in Costa Rica. So while the VA provides a medical program for service members living abroad, it is not as easy as it sounds to access that care. So it's very important that our community, our senators, our congressmen, our president of the United States, Mr. Biden, that he sees this as a problem that is not only legal, right? It's not only they're being punished over and over again for a crime that they may have committed while they were under stress, on experiencing mental health, trauma, and they just did not get the resources. So it's important to see this from a different lens instead of just criminalizing and punishing our veterans over and over for this.
Thank you for that. And just in the interest of time, I do want to touch really briefly on, as you mentioned, mental health is obviously a really significant issue. We've seen service members who were discharged from the military with less than an honorable discharge because they were experiencing mental health issues as a result of trauma experienced in the military, whether it was military sexual trauma, combat or non-combat related post-traumatic stress. And so I want to touch a little bit about some efforts that maybe the military can take to address those issues, both in and out of the military. But I want to talk about the Brandon Act specifically, and I will open it up to whichever one of you wants to take that question first, and just a few minutes to touch on that as we get ready to wrap up here soon.
Yeah, Keta, you brought up a amazing point, is that our service members are oftentimes discharged. Danitza mentioned the the symptoms of mental health being criminalized by the justice system. Well, data shows that it's been done in our military forever. What we thought was going on actually was. In 2014, then Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel released a memo giving, quote, new and immediate guidance to military discharge review boards for upgrading discharges of Vietnam veterans who may have been discharged for behaviors that were as a result of untreated, undiagnosed, or underdiagnosed mental health issues. And so that really goes to show that there is a pattern, right? What happened to them in the military was left untreated. And in order to be less of a problem for the command, they were discharged at the NJP level, non-judicial punishment. And what that does is not only give them less than honorable discharge status and makes their life a little bit difficult afterwards, but it bars them from receiving a lot of the access that they earned. Now, the VA has definitely made some improvements over the last few years in terms of providing more men and women access to these services. But what about those who already had those problems accessing that care beforehand and were criminalized and have been deported? We had a Marine that was deported in 2019 who had served in the invasion of Iraq and then extended his contract to serve in Afghanistan. And one of the crimes used against him in his administrative proceeding, they call deportation, was assault with a deadly weapon. That deadly weapon was a screwdriver that never left his pocket. And if that isn't preying on a disabled veteran with high ratings of service-connected disability for PTSD and TBI, I don't know what is.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, we have seen some improvements, but as we all know, we're grateful for those, and we know that the VA is is doing is really doing I think that the best that they can, given what they have. The same thing with the military now finally recognizing the injustices of so many of those individuals who were discharged with less than honorable discharge, and that we're trying, but we all know that we need to continue to do a lot more. Our suicide rate is high. And so, I thank all of the advocates who are pushing for reforms in this regard. As we get ready to wind down, I think it's really important for the public to hear, what it is, what call to action can we give them? What steps can we give them to take and to help us advocate for our veterans and military members in the Latinx community, and really it affects everyone. So I'm going to ask each of you to please just give, share a minute or two, some parting remarks and what you would like to see our community do, and how they can help these efforts. So Crystal, I'll start with you.
Thank you. So I will summarize the Brandon Act. The Brandon Act is a piece of legislation that will afford active duty service members to utilize kind of like a code word saying, that they want to evoke the Brandon Act if they are having a mental health, if they're in distress for whatever reason. What that does is that will eliminate the retaliation, and also it will prevent them from from losing their security clearance and from committing suicide. The how everyone can support that, and I can't emphasize how much we need America's support on this, but we need everyone to contact your members of Congress and ask them to support the Brandon Act, because this is going to be something that saves our service members from committing suicide, because they can't get mental health care because they're having to choose between their mental health and their careers.
Thank you. It's an extremely important and critical point. Dee, would you like to share some parting comments, please?
Yeah, I want to encourage our community, our Latino community in America, to get involved, to call their congressmen, their senators, their local legislators, and urge them and ask them, what are they doing to protect and serve our service members? I often, for example, in my family, I was not aware that I could call my congressman and ask them, right? Send a letter, call them. They work for us. We elect them, and they are there to serve us, to serve as citizens of part of their community. So I encourage everyone to reach out, get involved, and make those calls to ask them to support the Brandon Act, the Military Justice Improvement and Increasing Prevention Act, and to find out what are they doing to protect and prevent further deportation, and to help bring our veterans who are currently deported. All of these are questions that they are there to answer for us and to serve our community.
Thank you, Dee. Carlos, some closing comments.
Thank you, everyone, for the great advice. I want to invite our audience to visit greencardvets.org or lulac.org to be connected to there, so that you can see some of the legislative proposals that have been introduced in both the House and the Senate in order to try to alleviate these problems. Unfortunately, we have not had the support needed to get these out of committee, but the audience will be able to identify their congressman will be able to read the bill that they think is best and help to get it out to a vote. At this point, as many people as we need to get on there just to get a discussion to be had on the floor is necessary. And the other thing is that I'd like for invite the audience to get involved with their veteran community. You know, here in Chicago, we have really taken the family nucleus personally. And so we have events that are in partnership with other veteran nonprofits in the community and provide ways to get the veteran and their families involved. Planting community gardens, fixing community gardens now that it's here in the summer. We'll be having a vaccination drive in next month just to help get some of our community members to be a little more safe during this pandemic. So there are many ways to help, and please visit greencardvets.org or lulac.org to be connected there and learn about what is going on with the deported veteran population and what you can do to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And thank all of you for joining us today on this, have this great discussion. Thank you all for your service to our country and your continued service to our community. And to everyone who has joined us today, thank you for your interest in ensuring that we are taking care of our service members and our veterans. And we ask you to please get involved. Thank you.